What I would like to do is open up the floor to questions for our panelists. If we can start with Ms. Stack O'Connor, you have time probably for one or two at most. So I'll group those together. Does anyone have questions for her? Well, there you go. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't know if this is still on yet. Yes, ma'am. This month, the 25th of October, is the 25th anniversary of Operation Urgent Fury, which was Grenada, and it was also that probably prompted the Goldwater-Nichols Act, which did a lot for our joint forces. But a lot of us here that have been in country know there's a great disparity between what the Department of Defense can do and what the State Department interagency can do. There needs to be something done on the State Department level. What is DOD doing in efforts to have a similar act for State Department? Because if you look at what they've got on the books now, they may be increased maybe by 1,000. But when you look at what's happening with, for example, our civil affairs, we are hurting, and we're doing the brunt of the work. So that's my question to you is, what's being done at Defense to get the State Department to pony up more effort in being better at what they're supposed to be doing, especially when you look at what the Army's doing with sustainable ops, full spectrum operations, and we got to have that interlocking fields of fire with State Department. Thank you.
A lot. You hit on a point that we recognized definitely, I think, in the last QDR process, and in fact there's an entire chapter on building partnership capacity. A lot of that has focused on building partner nation capacity, but there's a domestic element to that the Department of Defense, working in cooperation with mainly departments of state, the Department of State, USAID, but also with Department of Homeland Security, has worked on building the capacity of those departments to fulfill their missions and to contribute to the broader national security issue that Kath raised. So one of the things that it was a defense priority. Secretary Gates and General Pace both testified on the Hill for the need for more State Department resources and argued for and obtained some legislation. It's sections 1206, 1207, 1208 of the Defense Authorization Act that allow the Department of Defense to provide assistance to the Department of State, to foreign governments through the Department or in cooperation with the Department of State. Those were, you could look at them as, in some ways, experiments or pilots that the Departments of State and Defense certainly want to continue doing. Additionally, Secretary Gates has mentioned several times in public speeches and on his testimony on the Hill the need to increase the resources for Department of State and USAID. He's also looked at the idea of recreating or creating a new U.S. information agency to handle the public diplomacy, strategic communication aspect. And he said we don't just recreate what we had during the Cold War, but the idea that there needs to be a national department or agency focused on that issue, because it's one where we as a nation are not doing well. People hear that and think, okay, here's the Secretary supporting more resources for the Department of State. That means less for the Department of Defense. No, Secretary Gates was very clear that we need more for the Department of State. That does not mean he will ask for less for defense, that this is a national security issue and that there needs to be more GDP put towards national security on the whole. I don't recall, my fellow panelists and Kath may know if he's made any statements on the Homeland side. I don't think he's advocated for any more resources there. I think Department of Homeland Security still, I think the idea is they have sufficient resources. It's applying the resources more smartly. But there is an opportunity for the new administration coming up to look at a defense review or a national security review rather than just a defense review. And we have ongoing at the same time as the Quadrennial Defense Review, the Nuclear Posture Review, which my office is looking at how do we combine these two reviews, or do we combine the two reviews. The intelligence community is conducting a quadrennial review. I think they're first. The Department of Homeland Defense is conducting their first quadrennial Homeland Defense Review. Their Homeland Security Review. The only component missing from that is the Department of State. So you have almost all of the components that are required and are conducting reviews. The new administration does have an opportunity to seize upon that, either direct state to do one or just do it from the White House or have us do separate ones. That'll be a decision for the new administration to make, but I think there is a sense, or there certainly be recommendations that we ought to conduct a national security review and at least tie all these components that are happening coincidentally together and make an administration statement.
General Summerall, what's happening with the Foreign Nation Partnership Program in the Guard? Is it still a program? If it is, how does it impact on the previous question, and also how does it impact on the QDR?
I think the department has recognized the value of the state partnership program and has dedicated resources to it in the FIDEP. I believe about $10 million in the upcoming year, and it's a tremendous program making a big difference. There's even some initiatives that I can't talk about right now that are even going to add more value to it. So I believe we're heading in the right direction with that one.
I had two very quick questions, one for Ms. Hicks, one for Ms. Stack O'Connor. For Ms. Hicks, could you comment on the interagency in the QDR? And for Ms. Stack O'Connor, as I recall, and my memory may be bad, but with regard to Army force structure in the 2006 QDR, we had a base force structure of about 482, and we had a 30,000 temporary surplus. But I think it called to move back to 482, but then, of course, we moved to roughly 547 or so by 2010. Could you comment on some of the force structure issues you think you'll be facing, and whether there's any chance that, as some commentators have asked for, will substantially increase the personnel in the Army, and Marines particularly?
I can't predict the future and what a new administration will want, but I think there will be an emphasis, and I'd actually defer, I understand, I think on the next